So I have now Shon Rowan, Dr. Shon Rowan, yay! And Shon, I think most people know this already, but Shon is also one of the state's MDL1s, which means that he also has his CrossFit level 1. And it's its own special level 1 that you can only get if you're a doctor, so it's very exclusive. And you were the first, I believe, in the state of West Virginia.
Yes.
And we have 2 in our gym. Bonnie's also an MDL1. So you have been working on a really cool project for the past, how long now?
Forever.
Right, yeah, right.
I think it's been about 3 years, yeah.
3 years. And it was a project that, why don't you just tell us about the origin of this project?
So I think the origin of the project was, it came out of this gym and conversations with Jeff and kind of figuring out how do you coach people with CrossFit that are pregnant and how does that work? And just looking at the literature, there's nothing out there. So then one Saturday, we're just in here talking, and that's when we decided to get our whoops and kind of start to explore how do you even start? So looking back at exercise and pregnancy, it's really hard. There's not much out there. And there's a few reasons for that. So for those of you that are here, why do you think that is? Why do you think why is there not much research in this area?
I'd say because most of them are too afraid to work out.
Yeah. Well, and people are afraid to research it. So the people that are working out, nobody wants to bring them into a project. So during my MDL1, for the MDL1, the actual course itself is the same, but it's only physicians, so it just kind of creates a network is the idea. And Greg Glassman owned CrossFit at the time. He came, talked to us, and during the question and answer session, I just asked him, are you ever going to do prenatal CrossFit? Because I think this would be such a great concept. And this is a man who wasn't afraid of anything, right? I mean, he sued Coca-Cola, he sued Ohio State, he didn't care. And he looked at me and he said, no, I'm too scared. Like, he's afraid of being sued. He's like, you just can't do it. And so when you have people like that are even afraid to approach the idea, you got to start somewhere. And that's kind of where the project, I think, is going to really help. Now, I think so just to describe our project a little bit, what we did is we took women who were trying to get pregnant and had them start wearing whoops. And these were women that were exercising at least 3 times a week. So then by doing this, we created the variable of pregnancy, not exercise. So it wasn't pregnant women and now we're telling them to exercise. It was exercising women who then became pregnant. Yep. So they were their own variables. And that's why it took such a long time, because working in infertility, a lot of the patients came through the infertility clinic. So knowing that 20% of the population has infertility issues, not everybody was getting pregnant right away. Some still haven't conceived, unfortunately. But it's a matter of getting them pregnant, but letting them not be pregnant long enough that we can use their data as they're in control. Looking at their heart rate variability, their resting heart rate, and then whoops, algorithm on recovery and those things, but also looking at sleep scores, so that we have so much data that we can look at that it's really astounding. We've got, I believe, 18 people who wore their whoop pre-pregnancy, during pregnancy, and now postpartum. And doing a final analysis of those 18, and then we're going to start seeing some publications. And I don't think there's anything that's going to be too amazing that comes out of this, other than I think there's some really cool stats. But what I really hope comes out of this is that it's opened up conversation. And we're already seeing that. WVU Today did an article on us. CrossFit Health has reached out. I'm going to do an interview with them and some sort of article with them. And I think more and more people are saying, hey, I'm so excited to see some results that I can share with my doctor. And I think that's really where the problem is it's the physicians with lack of knowledge. It's not taught in medical school. So if we can just start to open this conversation, we have a prospective study now. We know the outcomes of these pregnancies. They've all been very good. We've not had a single person who really had any issues. I think we had one person who delivered a couple weeks early, but these are women who continue to exercise. And now we can open up, hopefully this will open up the world to IRBs now can look and say, well, this prospective study was done, and now we can start to be a little more variable. Now maybe we can say, here's women who aren't exercising, let's put whoops on them because now we have the baseline data, and now we can monitor their activities and prescribe exercise.
Well, and what's interesting is when you started this project, you did some research too at the beginning. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember correctly. And I will say the timing of this project also pretty directly coincided with my first pregnancy,
Yes.
which is why Jeff got really passionate about it.
Yeah.
Because even with amazing physicians and midwives and sort of the natural line of questioning, and then what you can and cannot do, or if you Google it or if you see it online, the natural range is like, well, don't lift anything over 25 pounds, don't do anything that gets your heart rate too high, like all of these things. And I asked you, where did this information come from? And upon some of that research, it was from like the 1800s, right?
Yeah,
like, I mean,
or it was just made up.
Or just, it's just a guess. And it's funny because a lot of women, you know, if you've had a child already and you have a second child, when they say don't lift something over 25 pounds, I'm like, maybe you've not met my toddler, but I can't not pick him up for my entire pregnancy. So yeah, a lot of it just didn't sort of make logical sense either.
And I think some of that's been passed down through, because like I said, it's not a subject that's really taught in medical school. It's not taught in residency. It's just not discussed as much as it should be. In 1961, women were banned from running road races. Do you guys know why? Do you know what they were told and why it was they literally were banned?
All women, not just pregnant?
Women, yes.
Women, period. Okay, why?
Obviously, their uteruses were going to fall out. That's what they were told. They were told if you run a marathon, your uterus will fall out. And so it was let me check my years. So then 1970 was the first time a woman ran the New York City Marathon.
That is so...
Yeah.
Not that long ago.
No!
Yeah. And now before that...
Wow.
Someone snuck in.
Snuck into Boston, yes. Yeah, she snuck in as a man, under a man's name, and ran it. I don't know that she finished it that year, but I think she did, like a couple years later, she did finish it. And then what was real interesting, I love the 1972 marathon story. So 6 women were allowed to sign up. They signed up, but they were told they couldn't start with the men. They either had to start at a different time than the men or at a different location. So women... Because
if their uterus fell out on the road,
right.
it would be a problem.
Yeah, just for whatever reason, they wanted to keep them separated. They didn't want it to be a thing. So women, being brilliant, said, sure, we will start 10 minutes before the men. And you know what they did?
What?
They sat down for 10 minutes, and then when the men started, they did too. I mean, how brilliant.
I love it.
Should teach men. Don't mess with them. They're smarter than us. So, but 1972.
Yeah,
isn't that long ago?
No.
Wow.
So let me ask you this: as far as the research that's been done, and you're not at the place where you've done full data analysis or things like that, but in some of your anecdotal sort of what you've gathered so far, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was women are wearing this pre-getting pregnant. So is there anything that you're able to look at with the data and go, you're pregnant? Or, you know what I mean, before they take the pregnancy test?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. And yeah, I've had a few people who were very in tune to it. And that was one of the tough parts of about the study is we needed women who really were interested in the data. That, you know, they needed to be willing to wear a Whoop 24/7 for us to really get good data. So we had some dropouts, women who just didn't really.
You might want to
explain how the Whoop works.
What a Whoop, yeah.
So a Whoop is a heart rate variability monitor. It also checks your resting heart rate. It has sensors that check a whole bunch of things. I think it's 60 readings a second. Don't quote me on that, but there's a tremendous amount of readings, even down to your temperature. And it does not have a watch face, which is a interesting thing for women. So the look of it was a tough thing to get women enrolled because you had to wear this constantly, and some women didn't like the look of it.
Yeah.
You have to wear it on your wrist or on your bicep. That's the only 2 locations that are validated. That was the number one concern with most people who chose not to do it. It was like, well, I'm going to wear my watch on my one wrist. I don't want this on the other. So that was one of the biggest challenges, is getting people into the study, and then having them continue to wear it this entire time. One of the reasons we picked Whoop over some of the other heart rate variability is one is a ring. And what happens when you're pregnant? Your
Can't
rings
swell.
don't make it,
Yeah.
right? So with this, you can expand it. So it was nice that they were able to do
Yeah.
that. You can also accessorize a little bit. I see Jana has a different band, so there's different bands, there's different classes.
Oh, yeah, yours is fancy.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Jeff got a new band every week.
Yeah, Jeff had a new band pretty much every day.
Yeah. So getting the women to wear it, and then there were some people who were really in tune with it. You know, they really were paying attention, and I had at least 2 or 3 that would message me and say, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant, because their data had changed significantly.
In what way?
Most of them were noticing a significant change in their resting heart rate shot up.
It shot up because you're making a baby.
Yeah.
The baby's forming. That makes sense.
And then we did see that throughout the data as well, that so each trimester we did see an increase in resting heart rate, and we saw a decrease in heart rate variability.
Explain that.
So heart
if
rate,
I know nothing about
if you know
heart rate.
nothing about heart rate. So these readings are done overnight, so they're based off of your nocturnal readings. And heart rate variability, so my heart rate variability is not the same as yours. So if I'm sitting here with, say my pulse is 60 beats a minute, my heart is not beating every second. It's beating 1.2, 0.8, 0.4, 1.9. So it's very similar to when you're in labor and you're watching your baby's heart rate, right? And we're watching for that heart rate variability and you're seeing it jump all over. Ours do that too, just not quite to the same extent as a fetus. So if you are kind of flat, in the same way with babies, when we're watching babies in labor, if it's real flat, we get really concerned. Like, okay, we need to deliver this baby, right? So, because something's gone wrong. Well, we're the same. So if ours is real flat, we're not seeing that variability, then we're either hungover, which is a very common thing. We're dehydrated, we're just wore out, we're getting sick. A lot of times you can pick up that you're getting sick. WHOOP did a big study on COVID. They were figuring out that people had COVID a day or 2 before they had any symptoms. So women were noticing that their heart rates were starting to go up very early.
Makes sense. I'm interested in the next, so this is the current piece of this project, is that you're doing this while women are preconception and then in pregnancy. I'm really interested in phase 2, which I don't know if you even have a plan to do, but I'm hoping I'll talk you into that, which is postpartum, and just the changes and nursing and, you know, whatever the 5 years after they're born, when they're having sleep cycles and developmental changes, and as a mom, what your body's going through, even things like, and I know it's not like it's going to judge gray matter, but they say your gray matter doesn't come back in fully until what, 2 years post nursing or something. And that to me is really fascinating. Please don't quote me on these. I'm no physician. I don't know if that's true, but our bodies take a long time to. This is a huge thing your body's going through.
So right now we're looking at the postpartum data just up to 12 weeks, and we're actually seeing something fascinating. And it's always been thought that women who exercise, it's been thought by those who want to really research this stuff, that women who exercise during pregnancy, so say you're both elite athletes and you get pregnant and you tailor your exercise enough that you're still being active while you are PR and you're really going hard, you will probably pass her up 6 to 12 weeks after, or 6 to 12 months after pregnancy. You will have made more gains by being pregnant, even though you tailored off your workouts. And I think we are actually going to see that with our data.
Is that because of hormones?
I don't know that we know the answer to that. But what we're seeing is that heart rate variability, 6 to 12 weeks postpartum, is statistically higher than pre-pregnancy. That's not, we're not finished analyzing that, but that it's trending in that direction. So I can't make that 100% statement, but it looks like it's going to show what we have anecdotally thought for a long time. Which I think is a very important point for competitive athletes or women who have made these significant changes in their life and are like, oh, I can't get pregnant right now because I'm going to lose all my gains. Nope. You actually may see gains. You're not going to see them necessarily while you're pregnant, but this would suggest that you are getting more fit by being pregnant.
Well, I don't want to be too morbid about it, but there had been issues with other countries in the past with Olympics where women were purposefully getting pregnant and then terminating the pregnancy because you were getting boosts to performance, and it had to be outlawed, right? And that was in certain countries that were
I think it was the 1984 Olympics was the big one. Eastern Bloc nations had women. Now, so it's a little bit of a different concept, but similar, because you are seeing those early physiologic changes. Your blood volume increases significantly quickly. So it's the same concept as blood doping. Yeah. So you're essentially getting some blood doping in it. Now, how they did it without throwing up and things, but yeah.
But I mean,
if you Google it, there's actually an entire Wikipedia page on it. Yeah. And there's some controversy of whether it happened or not, but I'm pretty sure it happened. And how do you prove it? It's against the law, the Olympic law, but how do you prove it?
So for women that we have in our gym right now that are either conceiving or pregnant, let's start there. How does this relate to here? So the first question, the most obvious question being, is it safe to participate in CrossFit or any type of fitness training whatsoever while pregnant?
So with the caveat of I'm not allowed to give medical advice.
Right. I should have maybe worded that.
But that's okay. But no, because I think that. So let me just. So going back to, I'm just getting my years straight. 1985 was the first time that the American College of OB/GYN kind of chimed in on this, and sadly, a lot of providers out there, and we'll still hear it now. A lot of providers out there kind of stuck to these guidelines. So their guidelines were. They thought it was safe. So even back in 1985, we were told as OB/GYNs, I was 7, I wasn't told. Those who were practicing OB/GYN then were told it's safe. Now what they did have the caveat of don't run more than a mile, keep it under 15 minutes, keep your heart rate under 140, and keep your core temperature under 100.4. So we still hear that a lot. Oh, my Apple Watch showed that my pulse went up to 160. I went too hard. So in time, that has been eliminated, that thought, but you still hear that from a lot of physicians. We also hear the concept of don't start new activities. And I think that's you were given that advice?
Too.
The heart, oh really?
Yeah.
And your baby's 10 months?
Yeah, she's 10 months old. Yeah.
So we're still hearing that. Yeah. And so that was 1985. They actually updated that in 1994. They got rid of the heart rate. So that's how long it's been since that change was made, and we still have providers in 2021 still using the heart rate guidelines.
It's anecdotal, but and maybe you can't answer this yet, but in what you've seen in research so far, have you seen people going over that heart rate?
Oh yeah.
And again, it's also a small pool, so we can't be.
And these were women who were exercising prior to, so most of these were pretty fit women.
Yeah. Okay. But babies were healthy despite going over that heart rate at this point. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So again, 1994 we removed the heart rate. 2002, ACOG not only said it was safe, they started saying we should recommend 30 minutes of moderate exercise most days of the week. And then there really wasn't an update from 2002 till 2015.
And so that's interesting to me because so it's recommended that you do exercise, although I know a lot of women who are pregnant that have been told, but it's recommended that I don't exercise. And they're not all making it up. Like they have had physicians tell them we don't recommend you exercise. And so I just think that's interesting because even within the School of OB/GYN, that's changed.
Oh yeah, years ago.
Many years ago.
And this is another study I was starting to work on at one point. I think we really need to launch would be asking patients, not just in West Virginia, but nationwide, and like reaching out to some other centers and saying, and have pretty much exit interviews with the patients of a survey of, did your doctor talk to you about exercise today? And not really getting into what they talked about, but did they? Because when I talk to other providers, they hear me talking about like, oh, I talk to every one of my patients about exercise. I'm like, I doubt that because as much as I'm into this, I don't. Like it's a hard thing to bring up every visit because you have so many other things to talk about that you can't always do it. But I think it would be very interesting to see how many do. And when they did a study, it was somewhere around 2010, 2012, asking providers about the guidelines. It was amazing how many didn't know. And the saddest part of it was the residents and those that had only been out of training for a few years that knew the least. So that tells me that now our providers who are 10 to 15 years out, based off of that study, are the ones who knew the least about. They were the ones still saying the heart rate guidelines and these things. So there's a whole education component to providers that's going to be very important. But again, a lot of it goes back to being fearful to give the advice. And I think that's a tough, and having been in that position and talking to patients, there are times where they're like, oh, can I do this? I'm like, yeah. But then I'm in the back of my mind going, I think that's okay. Like, I know it is, but still when it's a one-on-one conversation, even though like I'm obviously invested in this topic, it's still sometimes in the back of my mind going, I hope nothing happens to this pregnancy that could be blamed on this. And I think that we all know that bad outcomes can occur. We know that exercise decreases the bad outcomes. It decreases diabetes, it decreases hypertension, it decreases stillbirth, decreases C-section rates. It decreases all these things globally. But when you look at each individual patient, when they have a bad outcome, you know, even patients have miscarriages. I have some women who, even in this study, who had miscarriages, because it's going to happen. 15 to 20% of pregnancies are going to end in miscarriage. Like, do you think it was because I was exercising too much? We know across the board, exercise is going to decrease those risks. But for each individual patient, that can be a tough topic to discuss. And I think that's a barrier for providers. So I think we need to have more of a broad discussion, letting people know that this is okay. So that way the conversations in the actual clinic rooms are a little more acceptable, maybe is the word. Yeah,
because we need more broad data.
You're right.
And also to remember that every single pregnancy is going to be different. Even
absolutely.
In the same body. There
Right.
could be totally different pregnancies.
I think too, there are a lot of times a person who's having trouble getting pregnant, that once they are pregnant, are probably much more concerned about, I don't want to lose this.
Exactly.
But the bottom line is, if it isn't a good pregnancy, you're probably going to lose it one way or the other. You know, whether you exercise or not. Chances are better if you exercise, maybe you'll be healthier.
Exactly. And you're going to decrease all those other risks that are risk factors for miscarriage.
So we have had a lot of people in our space doing CrossFit while pregnant, myself included, for both children. And one of the things that does come up is specific things that we do in here. And so we had actually started to come up with a model of scaling for different levels of pregnancy. And again, it's all based on each individual person. For example, I had some very special case issues with my pregnancies. And I won't beat around the bush, I was huge. Where most people are at like 6 or 7 months, I was at about 6 or 7 weeks because I had a specific disorder during my pregnancies that I just had all the fluid. And I'm not exaggerating, am I? I was...
You were...
So I had to change some things.
I gotta be careful how I answer that.
No, it's okay. Dorian's over there going, no, she's not exaggerating. I barely got through the door. But, so I had to change some things because where some women, you know, throughout the majority of their pregnancy don't have much of a bump, I had a bump very early. So I was switching to dumbbells versus a barbell so that I was making sure bar path wasn't coming near my stomach. Things like burpees to the floor I was not doing, but I was still doing burpees to a bench or something to where I was able to always keep my stomach away from having any type of direct contact. And we found ways, and again, where I was 3 months in may have been very different for someone else that was 12 weeks in and what they were able to do. So it is about tailoring per, and remembering each pregnancy is different. And frankly, you do still need to be safe. You do still need to pay attention. You do still need to understand your abilities and understanding where risks are worth it. Unless you are a box jump master, which you very well may be, you can absolutely do box jumps. For me, it wasn't worth it because I was like, I'm the least coordinated person ever. Is it worth it if I fall on this box jump? I made a choice, no, I will step up.
Because it's probably not the jumping.
No,
it's the if you trip.
It's the potential of me falling and landing on the box.
Can a rope climb? Is it going to hurt your pregnancy? Climbing up, no. Falling down,
but if
yeah.
you fall, yeah, right? Yeah. So it's those types of things too, and I think that is a missing piece of the conversation of fitness and pregnancy. Is it's not that the pregnancy itself or certain movements itself may be the thing that directly impacts the pregnancy, but we're all humans and we can all fall. We can all, and frankly, I think maybe other people feel this, but there is this thing that happens. It happened to me when I was pregnant, where immediately I was like, much more aware of my mortality, because things that normally I would have never even thought about, like don't fall down the stairs walking out of the house, right? I wouldn't have thought about that, but now being pregnant, I was like, all right, but I have to protect this life. Do not fall down the stairs, you know? And I think that bringing that mindset into a fitness space is actually really important, and having coaches or people that you can talk to, even if it is a trusted physician, building that relationship, physician, midwife, somebody that you can say, here's what I'm doing. Talk to me about it.
Right.
That seems like half the battle, right?
I think so, and I think listening to your body too, you know, and just because your coach says, I think you should do this, it's still okay to say, you know what, I'm not in that place today. And I think that's true whether you're pregnant or not. There's times you say, you know what, I'm just not in that place today. And I think that's one of the advantages of WHOOP, not to keep talking about WHOOP, but in pregnancy and out of pregnancy is when you get those red days, you're like, you know what, something's just not right today. I'm not going to push that limit. And remembering when you're pregnant, your center of gravity is changing. It's easier to pull muscles because everything's kind of stretched, you know, just kind of, you can still try those new exercises. If you've never done a muscle up, I don't think I would try it when you're 7 months pregnant, you know? Like can you do handstand push-ups? You'll see pictures all over the place online of people doing them. But if you've never done one, I don't know that that's the time to try, you know, so, but if you've never deadlifted, can you deadlift 95 pounds? Yeah, probably. You know, as long as everything else is going okay with the pregnancy and you recognize you're doing the proper form, those things, it's okay to take on new activities within reason. Right? So.
That makes sense. Cool. Any questions? Pregnancy,
personal experience,
post babies, that's kind of the world that you're in right now. Because our bodies just go through so much, and it is funny, I was talking to your wife actually, and saying, boy, wouldn't it be great if my body was the same today that it was a week ago? And not that men don't have that experience too, but I think it's on a very different level for women that are still having menstrual cycles, or even post-menopausal, or like wherever you are on the scale of being a woman. Our bodies go through like cyclical changes constantly, and I can tell you, I don't wear a WHOOP, but I can tell you that my own personal data, I know I am weaker. I cannot lift the same weights the week before I start my menstrual cycle that I can the other 3 weeks of the month. In my case, it's like 2.5 too. I can't do it. I am literally weaker. I cannot lift as much weight. No matter how, it's not mental, it doesn't matter what I do. And so those types of things are interesting too, because, and I don't know if that's being a woman. You probably don't know that. Do you know? I don't know if it's being a woman or if it's directly related to being a woman who had children.
Right. No, I think it's probably more being a woman.
Being a woman.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's something that's been studied either. So, sports gynecology could be an amazing field. There's one book, and it's been, you have to buy used versions, and it's from like the 1990s. So, you know, it's how do menstrual cycles relate? How do birth control pills? There are people who, at the time of ovulation, you have a surge of testosterone. That surge of testosterone helps to increase your libido, making you want to have sex so that you get pregnant, like, right?
Species survival.
We're animals.
Yeah.
So, what if you have a CrossFit competition in 6 weeks? You take a birth control up until 2 weeks prior to, so that you're ovulating on the day of your competition, so you have that surge of testosterone to increase your performance. This has been looked at and it has been done, and you know, so how do all of these things play? And what if you're on birth control and you're never getting that surge of testosterone because you're not releasing an egg? I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. So where are you nutritionally? We know that during your menstrual cycle, the different phases, you have different requirements. You may need more carbs, iron at different times. So I think it would be really interesting. They may do this, at collegiate or WNBA levels. Is your meal based off of your menstrual cycle? It probably should be, right? So if you're having the pregame meal, not everybody should be eating the same thing, probably, based off of. And I think they are in a lot of ways starting to tailor that, not just for women, but for men too, based off their different hormone levels, things to really kind of make it more specific. But definitely for women, I think that is an area that needs looked at. And should be. And maybe we will.
So, if you have a baby and you're nursing with fitness, because you brought up nutrition, nursing becomes its interesting own ball game whenever it comes to fitness, right?
Yeah.
Because and there's also a lot of those antiquated wives' tales around nursing too. Like working out, you'll lose your supply. Without giving direct medical advice, do you have an idea? Like, is that true?
Acutely, yes. So will you lose your milk supply? Maybe. Immediately after the exercise. So we often think of, well, I have milk in my breast and it's going to sit there until I lactate, feed, pump, whatever you want to do. But it's actually, will go back and forth. So as you get dehydrated, your body will pull some of that fluid back out. So now you may not have as much milk. So if your baby was about due to feed and you're like, oh, I'm going to do my workout real quick, and now you're dehydrated, and now you're going to have a really mad baby because your milk supply may be less at that moment.
At that moment, that doesn't mean over.
I don't know the exact answer to that.
Right.
Overall, long term, I don't know of any issues with that. But you would need, but at that moment, immediately afterwards, you may have a little bit decreased. Plus, feeding right before you work out is going to make it
more comfortable. I always tell, anytime we have a woman that comes in that has had a baby and they talk to me about nursing, I always suggest we have specific spaces that our dressing rooms actually second as nursing nooks, and we have said that to people because I highly recommend making sure that you pump or nurse first. You saw, my boys used to be in here with me every day, and I would nurse right before I worked out because it just made me more comfortable. Because you're literally carrying extra ounces of liquid just in your chest. So it changes balance. It changes anytime we were doing anything that involved double unders or things where you're jumping. You feel it. It feels different.
And if your babies are like mine, they got more comfortable and went to sleep.
Yes, and then I could work out because they were sleeping.
Have time to work out, so
right, that's was the added bonus to it. Yeah.
So, being a mother obviously is very demanding. I don't know from personal experience, but I've been around lots of mothers. So you can't always time everything in life to working out, but if possible, to make that kind of part of your routine to feed and then exercise, I think you will see benefits.
And for some people this may feel uncomfortable, but we actually had one newer mom a few years ago. She had the pumps that actually went right into the bra, so people didn't even know it was happening. So while she was warming up, it was pumping, and then she was able to just very discreetly, literally pull out a little thing and sit it to the side, and she pumped during every workout or every warm up, and and so now we're just in a world of technology where there are so many options to do those types of things. And again, that's if you choose to nurse. I'm not a pusher. I think there's a lot of benefits to nursing if it's something that works for your body, for your baby, and for your life. But yeah, there's a lot of different resources now.
I think even just opening up the discussion and making it so that people are comfortable or know that these things are an option, and maybe even having classes that are not maybe exclusive to those who are pregnant, breastfeeding, or trying to get pregnant, but maybe more inclusive of that.
Yeah.
And people know that this group is going to be a little bit more heavy on that group of women.
Yeah.
And also, then the scaling options are more discussed because if you're at this point in your pregnancy, you may want to do this level, and it could flow into the levels.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if they had levels and they had a postpartum.
Yeah. And we have, that would be cool. Yeah.
I have a question. So, since we're on the topic of nursing and fitness, how does working out while you're nursing, how does that impact like your need for your caloric intake? Like, because I know like whenever I talk to like my OB/GYN, it's like, oh, just 2,200 calories every day. And I'm like, okay, but I do CrossFit and, you know, I like to run and yada yada. So like, should I be eating more calories, or like, you know, how do you know, or what resources can you refer, or can we refer to?
Yeah, you may have a better.
Oh, I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think that nursing in calories is something we get it's very confusing because there's a lot of just information that contradicts each other. From personal experience, and I can let you, because I know you have to be careful about how you answer things.
No, I think this is one I can answer. I just thought maybe you.
Why don't you answer your first? But because nutritionally, I say again, a big piece of it is just listening to body. A lot of times we try to put an exact number on what we need, and that so often doesn't make sense because we're all very unique individuals with very unique needs doing different things. So having some sort of a blanket, this is how many calories I'm aiming for, I have personally found doesn't make sense. Pregnant, nursing, postpartum, or just in life. And I preach it, Janice heard me preach this a lot, because a lot of times we're told, if you want to lose weight, and they give you a certain calorie amount. And a lot of times it's wacko calories. It's like, do 1,000 calories a day. What? I'm a human being living a life. 1,000 calories a day, you know? So, anyway, so I'm all about, I'm a advocate for mindful eating in a way where you're listening to your body and giving it what it needs, which is very unpopular in this world because we like to be told exactly what to eat and when. Is that why you threw it at me?
Yeah, to kind of talk about that. And the other thing I would say is, so just pulling up my data from Monday's workout, which I thought was rough. It was the running, muscle up, and all that. I burned 298 calories. So I think a lot of times we think, well, I did this workout, I need to eat another 1,500 calories. But we're really not burning as many calories as we think. Now, one thing that a lot of people think, well, the number of calories I burned is what is the benefit. But it's actually your body then learns to burn everything differently. So it's not necessarily the workout itself as much as all the other things that it's kind of doing in your body and turning on those things. So do you need another extra, honestly, a perfect bar? 130 calories? Maybe, you know, that may be all you need, is just to add that one extra supplement afterwards just to kind of refuel your body.
In regards to wives' tale around nursing and how even if you didn't do any fitness, there's a lot that is said about, well, but nursing in and of itself, you need to add 1,200 calories per day or something. And a lot of women do the, like, frankly, the really wild postpartum diets where you can like see this on Pinterest and stuff where it talks about if you're nursing, here's what to eat to where you don't add calories but you don't lose your milk supply, so that you're actually losing weight by nursing. And it's like this, to me it is also, you just had a human and now they're feeding off of you. The thought of using that as like weight loss really hurts me, because we should be focusing on like our survival, the baby's survival, you know, not how to lose weight from this. It's a real problem, I think, in our diet culture. Yeah. But what do you know about calorie expenditure from nursing as a whole? It's hard because each person's different. And
it's a very interesting topic. So we've, for so many years, been focused on calories in. Less calories in should be less than calories out, and you'll lose weight, right? And study after study is now coming out showing that's not true. I mean, there was one person who I think ate something like 5,000 calories a day. He was eating so much, food disgusted him. He was like, I just can't keep eating. And he either maintained or lost weight. It's the type of calories is a big thing. Also, we've been told for many years, breastfeeding afterwards, you should do it to lose weight, right? I mean, that's kind of where you're going with that. I think it's somewhere around 500-600 calories a day that you burn breastfeeding. Now, if you are also trying to lose weight while you're doing that, we're essentially animals, right? So if we're decreasing our calories, our body, because that calorie in doesn't equal calorie out, is going to hold on to weight because we're feeding a child, and that is our purpose in life, right? Is to make sure that this child is getting its nutrients. So in some cases, you actually see women who are breastfeeding hold on to weight, no matter what else they do, because it's a evolutionary advantage to be able to have that calories for if there is a famine, because our body's genetic structure doesn't know that there's a
it hasn't evolved
grocery store
to
everywhere
where our
choosing
technology has.
right? Yeah.
Well, and this is true across the board, and I keep looking. Dorian and Jana both have taken my course, but I have a course that's called Stop Dieting and Feel Great Doing It, where I talk about why scientifically diets don't work. They just don't work because our bodies are so smart that it is trained. When you start to lose so much weight so quickly, fad diets where you're losing weight quickly and it's not small, consistent habits built over time. When we do that, it can't help. That's where we hear people talk about the plateau, or we talk about how they actually gained more weight back after. Your body's trained to do that. That's what it wants to do. Right. So we have to be really careful about making it small, consistent habits, which again, we don't like in this culture because we want things now. We want it fast. But if you want it to be there in a year or to be there in 2 years, that's how we're going to do it. And that's no different with nursing, whether there's more calories in or out. There's also, frankly, with nursing, our bodies naturally want to eat more because our bodies are smart. So we tend to already make up the more calories in, even if we don't realize it. Even if it's like not realizing that we had that extra handful, even if it's something like almonds, we tend to unintentionally consume more, and that has been scientifically proven too, because your body tricks you. Your brain's like, yeah, no, 2 more almonds, that'll be good. But as that adds up over time, you've hit your 600 extra calories. It doesn't take much.
I think fluids is the big thing. Staying hydrated, because that is one thing that you can have a loss of fluids. But while we're on the topic of nutrition and pregnancy, I think it's another field that's horribly studied. Were you given weight? Was your weight, like, discuss it with each visit, say, well, you should gain this much during your pregnancy? Some people do and some people don't.
I started my pregnancy and ended it at the same weight. So,
look at you.
And I never got a belly. I mean,
and how big?
I was.
How much did your child weigh?
Oh, she weighs 23 pounds. When she came 4 weeks early, so she was only 5 pounds and 15 ounces when she was born. Which
is still a really good weight.
Yeah.
So, and I think you're proving the point I was going to make, so thank you. That, we have this idea that based off of your BMI, this is how much weight you should gain. So if you're underweight, you should gain 35 pounds. If you're normal weight, you should gain 25 pounds. If you're overweight, you should gain 15 pounds. But where does that come from? Like, there's no data out there. I think, and Jeff and I talked about this so much, and I've actually explored studying this a little bit further, is I think in an ideal world, we don't weigh women when they come to the office. We do a body composition every visit.
Amen.
I think it would be so cool. Yeah. So
I think that would create healthier women all around.
Yeah.
Not just physically, but yes.
So in pregnancy, and I've talked to some radiologists about this, and we may do this. Again, it's a financial and safety issue, although it would be a perfectly safe study. No body composition has been validated in pregnancy because of the fluid shifts. You have a whole pocket of fluid. So when you look at, I don't know if you know much about body composition. There's several different ways to do it. There's the calipers, which if done properly is the most accurate, but it needs to be someone that knows what they're doing. There is the bioimpedance, which essentially is electricity running through your body, and I think that you guys have one here, right? Isn't that one bioimpedance? Then there's the displacement one, which is the bod pod. But when you start adding a whole nother human, fluids, increased blood volume, these sorts of things, how do you validate them? Placenta, which is typically 1/3 of the weight of the baby. So you're adding all of these different things. How do you validate any of this stuff? Well, probably by MRI. So MRI is probably the most accurate, but you have to have someone that knows what they're doing. So I've been in talks over time with radiologists of how can we do this? How can we have patients at different parts in their pregnancy do bioimpedance, bod pod calipers, and an MRI so we can kind of validate this. One, it would be a huge undertaking, and MRIs are expensive. So if you're asking someone to get multiple MRIs throughout their pregnancy, you'd have to have some large fundings. But I think this would be an amazing study. And then we're on the same page when it comes to BMI. I would say most women, if you are a normal BMI at term, you're probably sick. Like there's probably something wrong with you. because that's not true for everybody. I know some women who did it, but for the majority of women, something has happened that you haven't gained any weight. But what is that normal BMI? It's probably not 70.
Mm-hmm.
Is it 30? Is it 20? You know, what is BMI in pregnancy? And
how can you measure BMI in pregnancy?
And this is an issue when we are looking at medications in pregnancy, on labor and delivery all the time. We're still adjusting them to BMI, but should we be? Because what does BMI mean in pregnancy? I hope I didn't say that wrong, because I know several people who, and you mentioned it too, that gained no weight in pregnancy. That doesn't mean that there was anything wrong with your pregnancy or there's anything wrong with you. But when we see people that are in that 19, 20 BMI, and pregnancy, you're not going to see that in a healthy pregnancy in most cases. So I just think we need to redefine, and it's going to start by a major study of figuring out what that is.
Major study that I think has your name all over
it. This one's taken me 3 years just to get some data. Yeah.
Good question.
I'll help someone else, yeah.
Was that at all helpful to your question, though?
Was that the answer you expected? 20 minutes of mindful eating? Yeah.
The question was just about calories while nursing.
Yeah.
I would think that even being pregnant or nursing, shouldn't it be certain things that you're making sure you're eating, like, you know, like iron or calcium or something? You can't just, I'm going to eat more calories or less calories or anything. You have to be mindful of what you're putting in, so that it's nutritious for yourself and the baby.
And that's anytime.
Yeah.
Pregnant or not.
Right.
And another thing, when talking about calories in, calories out, there's also this whole world that we don't talk about enough, which is calorie density. And so this is where, yes, I could have 100 calories of a Coca-Cola, and I'm not picking on Coca-Cola, I'm just saying that would be very quick, right? I'd have a few drinks, boom, I'm certainly probably not full, but I've had 100 calories. Whereas if I tried to sit down and eat 100 calories of celery or carrots, it would take me hours. I would be so stuffed that I'd be borderline sick. And it's the same amount of calories as 2 gulps of a Coca-Cola. You cannot look at those things and say, well, calories in, calories out. No, it's not the same thing, because how are things fueling you? What kind of space do the calories take up in your body? What is the water composition of the food that you're eating? And there's all of these other pieces where we oversimplify nutrition, which is one of the biggest problems with nutrition, is that we oversimplify. We also try to make a lot of money off of it. We also try to put every human body in the same. Well, everybody needs, if you're like a woman and you're between the ages of 30 and 50 and you're this, you should have this many calories per day. What? What about the fact that we have entirely different bodies, entirely different lifestyles? It just doesn't make sense. Entirely different metabolisms. Or any, like, I have children and I'm nursing versus I don't. I have a work job where I'm on my feet all day, where I'm completely sedentary. You know, it's just, we can't, this one size fits all diet stuff is something I'm clearly very passionate about. It really bothers me.
And during you use the word mindful, which I think is interesting, that's also the name of your course. And I think so much of it is mindful. And our bodies are so much smarter than us. And this is nothing from a medical background. This is just from just watching people, that we, a lot of times, our body's going to tell us what we need to eat. We're going to have the craving. Unless you're always craving Coca-Cola and chocolate cake, then there's something wrong. But a lot of times, like pica, you know, it's like, why do we do that? Well, it's because you're anemic, right? So that's why you want to eat those things. And I think that, yeah, you're right. Like, listen to your body. We also, now you're going to get me down this rabbit hole. Our foods are so deplete of the things, you know. I mean, we have destroyed our environment. The way we farm food, mass production of farming, we are not letting the soil replenish the vitamins and minerals we need. So it's almost an absolute requirement for us to take some sort of supplemental vitamin and mineral. For most women, breastfeeding are going to continue the prenatal, which may be enough for some people, but for some people it may not. I think a little extra calcium, a little extra vitamins is going to go a long way for a lot of people. And that's not a medical advice. That's just where we are in this world when it comes to nutrition and vitamins.
Our sun and our earth are the things that provide the vitamins and minerals. And this is not a political, like, do we believe in global warming? It's not that.
No.
But what we know is that there is a change to how those vitamins and minerals are being received, whether it be because of environmental issues or how we're processing the foods, and that includes all organic, non-processed foods, because we were still processing our earth differently, or even if it doesn't have pesticides, the earth has pesticides, you know, it's like we can't get away from it. So we have to start looking at supplemental nutrition, unfortunately, in most cases.
And there used to be proper cycling of fields, or cycling of what your crop is.
Well, mass produced.
We're doing this crop, and the next time we're doing this crop, so that you're pulling those different things, and now it's just this mass production. And well, the soil doesn't have it, so we'll just spray it from an airplane, and then it'll be fine, and it'll grow really well, and we'll sell it in the store. And it looks great because it's this tomato that's this big.
Yes. But we're not getting the vitamin C from it.
So then what do the people do? The people get this big too,
Yeah.
because they're eating all the wrong things.
So what I tell people, and I wonder, and again, no medical advice, what I tell people is blood work. It is not BMI, it is not a number. As a matter of fact, I highly encourage everyone to throw scales away and never look at them, because I think that they are not useful. I don't think that they are a good resource for understanding what is happening in our body, and I also think, if anything, they are such a mindset and self-compassion destroyer that I tell everyone throw them away. The only scale I personally will use is the one that we have, because it also measures hydration, and it does look at things like body mass index. You can ignore that because it also looks at everything from helping tell you your metabolic age to other things that are happening in your body. But besides something like that, blood work, because it will tell us, oh, you're low in iron, hey, these things aren't looking quite right, and we can adjust there. And it doesn't sound like something that's very accessible, but at least in the greater Morgantown area, we're very fortunate because we do have the universities, and you can go and you can just actually yourself, unrelated to a doctor ordering it, you can go. The Cheat Lake Clinic actually does it, I believe.
The only one I know is over across from Tudor's Biscuit World. Speaking of nutrition.
Okay.
In the bottom of that, and you can't order just anything, but you can get thyroid, CBC,
a ton of your
CMT,
basic stuff to give
the basic
you
things that you would need.
You can pay out of pocket, it's like $15.
Yeah, you can get a
Seriously,
vitamin D level, which I used to not be a big vitamin D believer, but I'm huge now. And it's so if I order it and your insurance doesn't cover it, it's going to be like $200 some. If you go over there and get it, and I think it's ran on the same machine, it's $15.
It's $15. I've done it.
You just have to pay it out of pocket because there's none of that running it through insurance and all that, so it gets to be much cheaper.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great way to at least check in on yourself every so often.
Yeah.
I have a question. Like, we were talking about supplements, so like, to what extent can we count on our supplements to actually provide us with the nutrients that we're missing out on? Because you hear so much about, oh yeah, like supplements are unregulated and they don't really do what the manufacturers say they do. So
that's
a question.
That's a very good question. And I think one of the things that we get into with supplements is a lot of people would do this to Jeff all the time. Hey, what do you take? And I did it at first. I was like, hey, what do you take? Right? And what and his answer was, it doesn't matter what I take. What I take isn't what you need. And I think, so a lot of people call it stacks, your supplement stack. And I think we all need to figure out what that is for us and what our goals are. So what I take, which is, I take a good bit of things, isn't necessarily what you need to take, because we probably have different goals. And I think adding one thing at a time, kind of seeing how it makes you feel, seeing, is it giving you the benefits you want? That, to me, that's the most important thing, is don't all of a sudden be like, I'm not on any supplements, I need to take these 5 things. And then you start taking them all, and you don't know what worked or didn't work. You may be able to take one, and it may give you the result that you want, and you don't need the other 4. When it comes to regulation, you're right, most of them aren't regulated. If you do some research, you can find some good companies that give you some of the third-party testing. One very good one, and I have no financial Relationship with them is
Same with Whoop. I felt like I should say that. You have no
said
endorsements.
Right. And they did not. We bought the Whoops. They did not endorse the study. So they've helped us collect the data, but they've not contributed financially in any way.
Good caveat there. Yeah.
There's a company called Theralogics, and there's some other ones like that out there. And they do third-party testing, and they're making sure so you know what you're getting is what's in it. But you got to be very careful, especially when you look at fish oil is a big one. If you go to the store and it says fish oil, and on the back you look at the label and it says 2,000 milligrams of fish oil, put it down and get a different one. It should break down for you what the different types of fish oils are, and it's EPA and DHA are the two that you need to pay attention to. Because a lot of times it'll say 400 of EPA, 300 of DHA, and then 200 of other. Just don't worry about the other, just pay attention. If it's not listing out for you what's in it. CoQ10 is a big one. There's different forms. There's ubiquinol, there's ubiquinone. So there's things you need to pay attention to. Magnesium. A lot of people are like, oh, I take magnesium. Well, which of the 8 are you taking? There's some out there that have all 8 in it. They all have different functions. So I think that even when it comes to a simple supplement like magnesium, it may not, you're going to see magnesium, in most stores you're going to see magnesium citrate and magnesium oxide right beside each other, but there's another like 6 or 7 that'll have different effects. So that's something we can talk about offline sometime, but if there are certain goals that you're trying to achieve, you should tailor your supplements to that, not tailor your goals towards your supplements, which I think a lot of people do.
And so for those of us that that was a lot of words that were big.
Magnesium? A lot of letters. But...
You're like, I don't know, you're saying a lot of things there. All right, but also can be really confusing. Can be really confusing for those of us that are just like, I just want to do what's best to fuel. So the big takeaway I want to take from it is, again, I would recommend blood work or some of these other ways of testing outside of just what's on a scale or what's a BMI. I would also, again, I keep coming back to this, whether it be mindful or intuitive, understanding and tracking for a long time. You said choose one thing to start with. Stick with that for, let's even say 12 weeks before you add something, and really determine, is this making me feel better or worse? Or is it nothing? And whether that be just being conscious enough to ask that question mentally, or actually I suggest mindful eating journals, which in the case of my mindful eating journal, you're also tracking what supplementation you're taking, you're tracking your environment, you're tracking all sorts of things. Mine's a little bit more specific than most get, where you're just tracking what you eat. Because all of these things play a role, and we don't have time to get into synergy, but what you were talking about was, trying something and then also seeing, because we have to not forget that we're also a chemical being. So there is synergy to adding in various chemicals. I will tell you, we don't, and this is not now a sales pitch, but it's just a fact, we do not sell anything here that hasn't been super fully vetted. It was actually vetted by Jeff, and now that's come on to us. We're taking that over. Jeff had helped actually create lines of supplements, so he knew all the things about it. So when we chose, that's why we sell certain things from certain companies. We also don't go, we are dedicated to X company and sell all of their stuff, because that doesn't mean, just because their protein is superior doesn't mean that they have any business messing with their fish oils. You know what I mean? So we are really particular here, and we fully vet all the things we sell, because I will not put into someone's hands. Because the thing about our gym is we actually love our people, and I'm not saying that other people don't. I'm not saying other people don't. I mean, we have a different relationship. You're not a client. You're a member of the family. So I will not allow you at my benefit to take something that you shouldn't, that I don't think is actually the best product. And that's just a fact. Now with that, there is synergy of how these products work within our bodies. There's also food synergy. A lot of times we don't think about that. We think, and especially, frankly, in our culture, it's like, okay, let's eat a salad with our steak, right? Well, our bodies break those things down very differently. What acids we need to break down red meat is very different than what we use to break down iceberg lettuce, right? So we often don't think about that in regards to what we eat and when. And this is where some of the mindful stuff comes in, because what me eating two things together may work because of my specific chemical breakdown inside, but it may not work for Jana at all. And she knows every time I eat this roughage with this kind of meat, I feel like garbage, you know? But we are in a place of just like eating or doing things in a way that we're not thinking about it, and we don't think about how things relate. Or I know from experience and from keeping track of it, when I am like insatiable with a salt craving, chances are my iron's low. So what I need to do is not have the salt, and I need to figure out how to pump up my iron. And I know this from keeping track over years, and I know this from blood work, and there is a direct correlation to me craving certain foods with a certain deficiency. And they're not always what you would think. Again, you wouldn't think salt would have anything to do with iron, but man, and you see this in pregnancy, to bring it back, women that are craving ice all the time, or something that it seems to have, it has no relation, but that is a great sign that you need more iron. So, anyways, we got really tangential on this.
But to bring that back a little bit with supplements in pregnancy, I think it's very important. Trying to conceive, you got to really think about what supplements you're on, and talk to hopefully someone that understands supplements, because some of them are going to mess with your estrogen and testosterone levels and things that need to be controlled in a little different way to try to get pregnant. And the same as during pregnancy, especially when it's unmonitored. Not knowing what you're taking can have effects you don't want. Breastfeeding, probably to a certain extent as well, you know, kind of watching those supplements. So, although I'm a big fan of supplements, and like I said, supplements that are for you, during pregnancy, I think we've got to be a lot more careful when it comes to supplements. Because again, like, we're just finally trying to get around to studying exercise in pregnancy. We know nothing about supplements in pregnancy. We know very little about most medications in pregnancy. So,
have you found any correlation between exercising and becoming pregnant? And the fact that, you know, like, you probably need to find the right person, but if they weren't exercising when they started exercising, was it easier? Did that help in some way?
So not in our study, because in our study everybody had already been exercising when they first enrolled. From personal experience and from, you know, different journal articles and things that have looked at this, exercise does in most cases improve your chances of conception. Part of that is just weight loss or weight shifting. You know, even if the scale isn't changing your body composition and things that your body's more receptive. If you're significantly overweight, your body's producing inflammation and things that you have essentially a sick state, and your body knows that that's not a good time to bring a child into the world, because it thinks you're sick, right? Or it thinks that there's a disease in the world, and that's not a time to reproduce. But also, you can go to the other end where you start to restrict calories to the point that your body's like, okay, there's a famine.
I've actually heard that a lot of people at some time that said, I couldn't get pregnant till I gained weight.
Yeah, there are people on that end of the spectrum.
That sounds crazy.
Not many in West Virginia, but there are a few.
And that's true for men too, in both cases.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Supplements and...
very true for men. Huh? Yes.
With supplements.
Men taking supplements and not realizing.
Can majorly impact fertility.
Yep, we sometimes have men come in and like they have no sperm. Like, do you take anything? No, I'm just on this supplement. And like, oh, stop it. And they come back and they have sperm. Yeah. We've had cases where we're doing in vitro fertilization and the man comes to give a sample and there's no sperm. We have eggs and all the sperm's gone. And from the time that he had given his first sample to then, he'd started some testosterone booster from, you know, one of the local supplement stores. And even though there's not testosterone in it, there's something that has happened there. And that's a tough situation, because now we have nothing to fertilize the eggs with. So luckily we can freeze eggs these days, but before 2014 we couldn't. So that's you know, even then that's a newer technology. So yeah, men, and then adipose tissue produces estrogen. It does, and estrogen pushes down testosterone levels. So and men that are significantly overweight, we can see decreased sperm counts because of low testosterone as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So exercising in men, sometimes we see an improvement in sperm counts.
Any other questions? Because we should wrap up. This is good. This is good. I enjoyed this. It was really clinical in a good way.
Good.
Yeah. Thanks.
I mean, I always think it's good because
Yeah,
that's
I
my
know.
life.
I
That's what I
know.
talk about all the time. So I don't know how much other people
Yeah.
always enjoy it. But.
And I don't know if we answered questions that people had. I was double checking. I wasn't like being rude on the phone. I was actually double checking to make sure none came in on the Facebook page. But we will post this video, and then people can also shoot some questions. And again, no direct medical advice will be coming from Dr. Shon Rowan. However, as a gym, especially when talking about being pregnant and fitnessing or sharing of experiences, that's part of Mom Week, is we're trying to share experiences. The more we talk about things, the less taboo a subject becomes, and the more we can go, oh wow, we have a shared experience. Oh wow, I never thought about humping while warming up. Or you know, and we can share resources too. To just wrap this up, do you have any resources you suggest, or any final takeaway of like, talk to your doctor about this specifically, or anything like that?
No, I would just say I think it's okay to challenge your doctor to answer your questions. And to challenge them. And if you say, hey, I CrossFit, and they say, oh, don't deadlift more than 25 pounds, say, do you have any literature that backs that up? Or do some research on your own. Be careful when you do it. The American College of OB/GYN has a patient portal, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. So, anything that ends in org is usually going to be a little more reputable.
Mm-hmm.
And if they have a provider side and a patient side, sometimes that's even more reputable. There's a lot of times a lot of good patient resources out there. Mm-hmm. Stay off the blogs. You're going to find things that you don't, like you're going to go down holes you just don't want to go. Try to stick to those resources. But make your doctor talk to you about it. Challenge them to find the information as well.
And advocate for your own health. We are in a healthcare system that moves, and I don't think you would be for a second, but no offense, moves patients in and out very quickly. Mm-hmm. And it's also mass production, right? And so advocate for your own health and say, I need another minute to ask you these questions. That is your appointment, right? I mean, at some point they can cut it off and kick you out, but like, take your time. If it's just a quick, hey, your blood pressure looks good, and they're back out, say, whoa, here's my list of questions. And I was a little bit, I'm sure you guys will be shocked by this, borderline obnoxious in the fact that I'd go with my printed list of questions to make sure we covered everything that day. And it was never a problem. All of the physicians that I've ever worked with actually were more than happy to answer and receive and talk about those questions.
We usually appreciate that because you're coming in and you make it flow. Instead of going, I know I had other questions. Do you remember what it was? And then there's like 10 minutes of you trying to think of your question. Yeah. I'd rather you just ask the questions, because most of the time the questions you have, we know the answer to right off the top of our head, because the 5 people in front of you all ask the same question. Yeah. If you need to have a long discussion, like, you know what, I really want to sit down here, I want to talk to my doctor about these supplements, about these specific exercises, about this specific thing. Don't be afraid to, when you make that appointment, to say, I know I'm just having a return obstetric visit, but I need a little extra time today. And I know my nurses will do that. They'll say, hey, we took 2 slots for this patient today. Or they'll make a note in there. So I know going into that visit that if I'm double booked in a slot, and I know that you have extra questions, that maybe I'm going to go see the other patient first and get that out of the way so I can spend a little extra time with you. So me coming into that, knowing that, don't be afraid to say, I have some extra questions today. Or, hey, I have some other questions. I know you're in a hurry. Do you mind if I send them to you, because we now have all these patient portals?
Yes.
Would it be okay if I send these to you or to your nurse, and then you can get back to me when you can? And I think those are different resources that we can use.
Those MyChart and all of these different portals now that are out there, I have found are amazing in the pre. So if I know I have a list of questions, I can send those in advance directly to the physician, so that when they come in, they can just rattle off the answers and they're prepared, especially if it's something, let's be honest, not all, I will not go down because we're wrapping this up. When it comes to nutrition, education in particular, I would argue in the United States of America and beyond, we do not do a good job in medical school of informing and preparing people for nutrition. And some of that makes sense because we're looking at getting physicians trained for more specific things. Although nutrition,
I would argue that if we focus more on nutrition, we could eliminate
a lot of these things. Right. But a lot of people are not prepared for that, especially if we're talking about specific supplements or so. In order to build a great good collaborative relationship with the physician, making sure you're giving that heads up. I'd really like to talk about this so that they have time to do their own homework as a physician to come in.
That's
I think
a great point.
it's a reciprocal relationship then, and I think that's important. But I think not being afraid to advocate for your own health is so important. It is just so important. And to say, I do need more time, I do need my questions answered, and it's not something that you should be double billed for or anything like that. You should be able to take that time. So often I think we're rushed, or bullied isn't the word, but like we just think like, okay, they checked this, I'm good. They took my weight and they took my blood pressure. I'm all set. Well, no, this is a very complex machine, and we need to figure out how to work best with our physicians on that.
And that's totally true. I mean, I've actually gone in with list, and they said, "Could I see your list?"
Right.
They read it,
Yeah.
but also know a little ahead of time. I've done some research on, my specific age and stuff like that. Like what should be done, and if they're not recommending it, I'll say I really do need.
Well, like
I
certain
need a test
screenings.
for vitamin D, or I'll need something like that. So know that kind of ahead of time too, so that you can make sure that's dealt with.
And don't be afraid to also mention it to the nurse. And when they're putting you in, say, oh, by the way, I want to talk to the doctor today about this. Because a lot of times the nurse can spend a little bit more time with you. They can say, well, here's what he's probably going to say. So she's already kind of built, or he has kind of built that up for us. So when we come in, we have, oh, by the way, you also wanted to talk about this. And sometimes you forget because it's like, oh, all these other things are going on or something, other conversation. Oh, by the way, my nurse told me you wanted to talk about vitamin D today. What was your question on that? So it helps us too. So don't be afraid to use the nurse as a great resource.
I'm pro Western medicine. I'm pro physician. I am anti thinking that doctors are God. We have to remember they are human beings, and they also may need time to prepare. They are also people that could make mistakes and don't know your internal body the way you do or should. And we've got to remember that too when building a relationship with a physician. So, or not
or
using,
midwife or nurse
or midwife or
right.
whomever.
Provider. Right.
Provider, yes. And not using, whether it be an actual provider or a medication or something as a crutch to our own health either, and understanding what's happening. So, yay, good talk. The end. Thanks, Shon.